Hey everybody, welcome to J Stern Designs. Today what I want to do is show you a really easy neckline finish for the raglan sleeve top. Before we get started with that, I just want to explain a little bit about what makes the raglan sleeve different when it comes to finishing the neckline. You can see here that the sides of the neckline here are being formed by the sleeve cap or the top of the sleeve. Okay, and what that means to the shape of the neckline is this fabric in here has to stretch over your shoulder. Okay, so when you're wearing it, there's more stretch to the neckline going this way than there would be in a traditional top that has a set-in sleeve where the sleeve is actually, set right on the ball of your shoulder and it's hanging from there. The raglan sleeve is actually ends up at the neckline. Because you've got it pulling to the side and you also have it pulling down with gravity, it can be more easily open. So if your band is not short enough compared to the measurement of your neckline, it can be more open than the pattern looks on paper. Let's look at the paper pattern so you can see what I mean. All right, so you can see this is my front. Okay, and this looks like a pretty small neckline, and then actually if I put the back right next to it, I've marked all my seam allowances. You can see that that is not a huge neckline. But if you compare the shape of the openness of this neckline looks like it grew and is a lot wider. Two things contributed to the shape of this more open neckline. The first thing is this knit is very loosely woven, and it's very stretchy. So when I put the band on, even though the band is smaller than the neckline opening, it's stretched and became more open. The second thing is when I measured the neckline to cut the band for this top, I used the edge of my actual garment. So I want to just sort of illustrate to you how that can be very different. I measured the neckline of the pattern. I measured the front neckline minus the seam allowances and doubled it and got 11 inches. And the back is 7 inches minus the seam allowance. And then I also measured the top edge of the sleeve. Okay, and that measures 6 inches times 2 is 12 because you have 2 of them. So the total measurement for the neckline on the pattern itself is 30 inches. When I measured with a tape measure all the way around this neckline before I finished it, I got a total of 32¼ inches. So this neckline grew 2¼ inches. So what that means is when I shortened my band, because I wanted to take it in a little bit so it didn't gap, I made it 1 inch shorter in the front and 1 inch shorter in the back. So what I ended up doing was making a band that equaled the original length of the pieces before they started to stretch. All right, so what I ended up doing was making a band that was actually the same length of the pieces as they were cut out before they got stretched. So for this one I'm working on now, I want to make sure that I retain some of the original shape, and I just want to show you what that looks like. On this top, I measured the pattern, and you can see that this neckline has a much more true to pattern shape. It keeps the knit drawn in. And this knit is also very stretchy. So had I measured it the same way I measured this one, I would have gotten this open neckline. And if you look at some of the videos closely, when I was wearing this tee, you can see that sometimes it actually droops down and looks like a V because this band is not snug enough to keep this neckline in shape. So that's just something I wanted to point out to you before you cut out a band to finish your neckline. Okay, so good news, I decided to do all of the math for you. Here is a chart that shows all of the different neckline measurements on the actual pattern pieces. That way you can use this as a guide for cutting out your band. All right, let me show you what I did to make a band for the shirt that I'm working on. You can see here that I've cut a band that's 2½ inches wide by 28 inches long. And then I folded it in half right sides together and I serged the ends together. That's actually the first step. You can see here the ends are serged. This is going to become the center back of your neckline. Now what I want to do is show you how to find the center front of the neckline. All right, so center back is over here. That makes this center front over here. So I'm just going to put a pin at my center front. All right, now I'm going to get my shirt. The first thing I'm going to do is fold this band in half now that I know where my center front is. And I'm just going to trade my pin at center front like this, so it's ready to go. An easy way to find the center front and back on the shirt along the neckline is to fold it matching the armhole seam. So I'm going to fold it in half like this and then lay this nice so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so this is my center front right here. I'm going to put a pin. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing in the back. I'm going to match the shoulders, the armhole seams, and find my center back. All right, so now I've got center front of my shirt marked, and I've also got the center front and back of my band marked. Okay, I've got it pinned center front and back. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stretch the band until it matches the neckline, and then I'm just going to walk my fingers in so I can pin it together in the middle of the sleeve, at the top of the sleeve, and that distributes the ease. All right, so now you can see I've got this area and I've got this area. Okay, you can see it's pretty evenly distributed. Okay, and you can also see, because I use the pattern as my measurement, there's a lot of extra in here. Okay, this neckline has really grown even though it's not as stretchy as the one I'm wearing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stretch the band out to match the neckline like this. I'm going to put my finger here and I'm just going to add a pin in the middle there. And then I'm going to do it to the other side as well. All I'm doing is stretching my band until the shirt fits. So if you have it lined up like this, just gently stretch it. Okay, and you can see that that now matches perfectly, so I'm going to put a pin there. Okay, now I'm going to repeat this process for the other side. So I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to go from center front to center back again. I'm going to stretch the band until it matches the neckline. Okay, so get it lined up and then just stretch it till it matches like that. See how that's a pretty good fit? I'm going to walk my fingers in there and find somewhere near the middle and pin it together. Okay. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing I did on each side of that. I'm going to stretch the band to fit the neckline here. All right, let's just put this last pin in and then we can go to the serger. All right. All right, so now we're ready to go to the serger, and we're going to serge this band on using that four thread stretch stitch we've been using. I want to put the neckline under the presser foot so that the garment is facing the feed teeth to help feed in that extra. So I'm just going to turn my whole shirt inside out like this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the shirt under the presser foot right before the center back. I'm going to lift my needles, make sure I can get the whole thing under there like that. I want to make sure that the band and the shirt and everything is lined up. I'm going to put the presser foot down, and I'm going to take the pin out because I don't want to serge my pin. And I'm going to make sure that the tails from where I sewed the band together are ready to get cut off. And I'm going to start serging. All right, and after I get over the center front, I'm just going to gently stretch to make sure the neckline is matching the length of the band. Okay, and I'm going to work pin to pin. So as I go to this next pin, I'm stretching the band to fit my neckline. I'm going to work to this pin. All right, and then again, I'm going to stretch the band to fit the neckline. making sure my tails are nice and ready. All right, and I'm just going to work all the way around my neckline like this. All right, so you can see I'm almost back to my center back, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to serge until I cut off the tail. Okay, then I'm going to put my knife down so I don't cut anymore. And I'm going to overlap my start point by about 1/4 inch. Okay, then I'm going to lift up, wiggle the fabric off the back, off the stitch finger like that. Put the presser foot down and finish and chain off. Okay, so you can see even before I give this a nice press, we've got a nice shaped neckline here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to press our seam allowances down with the iron, and then we'll have this really nice finished neckline. You can see I cut my strip on the bias, so the stripe is going diagonal across my neckline finish. All right, so good news, that finishes the neckline, and I just want to quickly explain to you that if you're going to use the optional cuff pattern piece, the process for finishing the cuff is exactly the same. You can see here I cut out my cuff and I sewed it together along the short end, okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half, just like we did the band. Okay, and then you're going to match it to the underarm seam. So here's my sleeve, and here's my underarm seam. I'm going to put it right over the sleeve like this. I'm going to line up the underarm seam with the seam in the cuff, like this. And I'm going to pin it in place. Now, unlike the band that's around the neckline, there's nothing to ease in. It should be 1-to-1. Okay, so this is really easy. You're just going to pin this together and serge around the inside of the sleeve to finish it with the cuff. All right, so see, this is all pinned together now. Okay, all the edges are matching. I'm going to put it into the serger so that the presser foot is here, okay, and the cuff is against the feed dogs. That way we're sewing inside the circle. It makes it very easy to see where you're going. Let me just show you quickly how to do that. All right, so I'm just going to start behind one of the pins, like this. Make sure everything is lined up. I'm going to lift my needles, make sure it's right up against there. If you locked your knife down, make sure you pop it back up before you start serging again. I'm going to take this pin out immediately, and I'm just going to start serging. You know, just work a little bit at a time, but you can see that if you're sewing inside this tight circle, you can see where you're going because you're inside it, okay, and all this extra is over here. So see how easy it makes it to see what you're doing? This is a really quick way to finish the sleeve. And again, when I cut off the tail from where I started, I'm going to put my knife down and overlap my stitching. And then I'm going to make sure the needles are up. I'm going to wiggle it off the stitch fingers in the back and chain off. All right, so you can see now I have this really cool cuff at the bottom of my sleeve. Isn't that neat? No fuss, no muss. All right, so that's how you finish the neckline and the sleeve with a cuff. The last step to finishing your top is to hem the bottom of the shirt. You can press the edges under and use a twin needle on your sewing machine. You could also use a cover stitch on your serger if you have that. One of my favorite ways to finish the hem when I'm working with knits that don't curl or ravel is to actually leave them raw. It's my favorite technique for matte jersey because it gives a nice flowy drape to my hem instead of having a finished folded edge that's a little bit more structured. If you're going to leave your edges raw, just check to make sure that the knit will stand up to that. You know, examine the cut edge and make sure that it's not going to get damaged by repeated stretching. And then if you do decide you have like the perfect knit to leave raw, all you have to do is tack the bottoms of your side seams so they don't come undone when you're wearing it, and you can leave it raw. All right, so that completes this series of classes on the raglan sleeve top. If you have any questions or comments, or if you need help doing a hem, please post your comments below. I will help you. And I just want to thank everybody for using my patterns because I know you have a lot of choice when it comes to purchasing a pattern. There's a lot of talented independent pattern designers out there. So I feel kind of honored that you've decided to work with my pattern. I hope you've enjoyed these classes, and I hope to see you again soon.